The highway stretched endlessly, a ribbon of asphalt vanishing into the darkness. Jake had been driving for hours, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. The only sound was the hum of his car and the occasional crackle of static from the radio. He was miles from the nearest town, and the fuel gauge was dipping dangerously close to empty. When the dim glow of a neon sign appeared on the horizon, Jake exhaled in relief. As he approached, the flickering letters spelled out, "Last stop gas and snacks." The station was an isolated relic, seemingly untouched by time. The paint was peeling from its walls, and a single bulb above the entrance buzzed faintly. Jake pulled into the station, his tires crunching over gravel. The air felt unnaturally still, heavy with an oppressive quiet. As he stepped out of the car, he noticed the emptiness around him. The highway stretched into darkness in both directions, and there wasn't a single other vehicle in sight. Inside the station, the fluorescent lights cast a sickly yellow glow over the shelves. They were stocked with dusty snacks and outdated magazines. Behind the counter stood the clerk, a wiry man with greasy hair and a smile that seemed too wide. His eyes darted around the room, never quite meeting Jake's. "Fuel up, huh?" the clerk said, his voice cheerful but hollow. Jake nodded, feeling a shiver crawl up his spine. He swiped his card at the pump and filled his tank, eager to leave. But as he got back on the road, something strange happened. Barely a mile down the highway, the gas station reappeared ahead of him. The same flickering sign, the same cracked pavement. Confused, Jake pulled over, checking his GPS. The device showed he was traveling away from the station, yet there it was, exactly as he had left it. Deciding he must have somehow doubled back, Jake turned his car around, driving in the opposite direction. He kept his eyes fixed on the road, refusing to look at the rearview mirror. Yet, after only a few minutes, last stop. Gas and snacks appeared once more, its neon sign blinking like a beacon. This time, Jake parked in front of the station, his hands trembling. He stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling faintly. The clerk was still there, grinning at him. "Back so soon?" "What's going on here?" Jake demanded. "How do I keep ending up back here?" The clerk shrugged. "You can't leave. It's just the way things are." "What do you mean? What is this place?" The clerk's grin widened, revealing teeth that looked unnaturally sharp. "You'll figure it out soon enough." Jake stormed out, his heart racing. He jumped into his car and sped off, the tires screeching against the gravel. The road stretched ahead, but the scenery around him began to shift. The asphalt seemed to blur, the surrounding darkness pressing closer. He drove faster, gripping the wheel until his knuckles turned white. Then, as if out of nowhere, the gas station materialized again. But this time it looked different. The lights were dimmer, and the windows were fogged with streaks that looked disturbingly like handprints. The buzzing neon sign flickered more erratically, and the air felt colder. Jake hesitated before stepping inside. The shelves were no longer filled with snacks and magazines. Instead, they held items that stopped him cold. A leather wallet he'd lost years ago, a photograph of him as a child, even his old high school jacket. Each object was unmistakably his. "Why are these here?" he shouted at the clerk, who stood silently behind the counter. The clerk didn't respond. Instead, the walls began to pulse, as if the building itself was alive. Whispers echoed around Jake, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing second. He turned toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. The windows, too, were unyielding, and through the fogged glass, he saw figures moving in the darkness. At first, they were shadows, shifting shapes that pressed against the glass. Then, they began to take form, faceless, humanoid figures with elongated limbs and twisted postures. Jake stumbled backward as one of the figures leaned close, its blank face peering in at him. The whispers grew deafening, overlapping into a chaotic cacophony. Jake covered his ears, screaming for it to stop. The clerk, now grinning impossibly wide, simply watched. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and the whispers stopped. Jake turned to see the figures had vanished, but the reflection in the glass wasn't his own. It was something else, something dark and unrecognizable, its face a twisted parody of his. The bell above the door jingled, and Jake turned to see himself walk in, except it wasn't him. It was the reflection, grinning with hollow eyes. The lights went out, plunging the station into darkness. When the neon sign buzzed back to life, the station stood empty once more. The highway remained desolate, the only sound the faint hum of the sign. Another car approached in the distance, its driver pulling into the lot, weary and unsuspecting. The clerk smiled, ready to greet the next guest.